the dark, I play my dreams. Permaculture flows like sweet streams. I'm the daddy with the know-how seed. Creating the world like it's meant to be. Permaculture, P-I-M-P, I'm the king. That's the love in everything. Bring a change, making it last. Join the permaculture.
Welcome to episode 328 of the Permaculture Pimpcast, where PIMP stands for Permaculture is my passion. The only Pimpcast on planet Earth where we discuss permaculture, preparedness, and practical living. Oh yeah, glad to be here with y'all this evening. All right, so this episode, as always, brought to you by Hickory Ridge Soap from TwoOldCrowsHomestead.com.
Turn that simp into a pimp.
Bam! Living Soil Foundation. Yeah, buddy, we are getting it done out here. Anxiously waiting on some test results, and we'll definitely let everybody know just exactly how we're doing with that. And then once we've crossed the line, we will have a decentralized way that everybody out there can turn around whatever junk you got going on at your place, or maybe grandma down the road, or your mom and dad, whatever the case may be. We are coming out with that, and it's going to be out there before too long, Lord willing. All right, y'all, if you're here with us live, please hit that thumbs up. Tell everybody we're live so they know to start suppressing us immediately. So I want to give a quick shout out to some of the ones I see here in the chat tonight. So D. Swan, Jane W., Steve Baker, Dana Green. Yeah, it sounds like I'm announcing members of my band or something. And I'd like to introduce my band, Sexual Chocolate. They play so fine, don't you agree? But anyway, I don't have a band, but we got a ballin' band that does all of our intro and outro music, so you got to love that. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, man. I've been really kind of chomping at the bit to do this show because I'm going to drop some things that maybe you didn't think about, and William too. And before we get into that, we're going to talk about some of the farm news. Well, yesterday had a meeting with a bunch of freedom activists here in the Asheville area. Well, it's not where I live, but we had to go to Asheville to go to there. And of course, we were prayed up from the feet up because you never know what you're going to run into going into Asheville. But anyway, always a joy to hang out with those folks. And, you know, and folks, just think about it. When you go to meetings like this, you may not vibe with everybody there. But if you can just look, for me, if I can vibe with just one, and your mom and I vibed really well with one lady we've been wanting to talk to since we started going to these meetings, but it just never seemed to work out. I mean, I'd always be tied up and then she'd be out of there before I could ever say anything to her. But it was pretty cool to hang out with her yesterday. And man, I'm really, really awesome and interesting person. I can't wait to get her on the show. You folks are going to be blown away when you figure out what she's been into and what she's done over these years. It's pretty doggone impressive. And a few others out there that we've met. So other things we've done. Today, we finally are able to buy road bond, which is basically gravel, like for a driveway. It's got a little bit of sand, some aggregate, some stuff in there. And finally getting around to fixing this driveway that's been messed up ever since the hurricane. You couldn't buy rocks for the longest time. So now every time I got to go to town for something, I'm making sure I'm picking up another, load of rocks. So, it's not like trying to drive on the moon when you get here. So that's another little thing we got going on. Trying to get into doing some extract. Good night. Compost extract, folks. I'm here to tell you, folks, with the things that we are doing with that stuff, when we finally are able to just kind of reveal it, it's going to blow your mind, especially. But William, what is the key to making a really awesome extract?
Making bomb compost. If you make bomb compost, then you can make some awesome extract. And extract is just knocking off the organisms from your compost and suspending them in water. There's a difference. A lot of people get it mixed up with tea. There's a big difference between extract and tea. Tea, instead of just knocking them off and then like immediately using it, you're putting it in a bubbler and then you're allowing the microorganisms to reproduce, develop glues and stuff like that. That's a lot harder to make than extract. Extract is pretty simple and quick.
And the reason why you'd want to do a tea, it's more like a foliar spray, something you'd want to be using about this time of year, because what it is, the coolest part about this, and I'm going to borrow something of I'm going to loosely quote Stefan Subkowiak, is that we're not killing anything. We're just displacing. When you have leaves out there, imagine a leaf and it's a site on a plant, okay? It can either have good stuff or bad stuff. So you can either fill all of those sites on those leaves, on your branches, on the trunk, in your garden. You can fill those sites with beneficial bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa, arthropods, you name it. And like William said, when they are in the process of reproducing, they create these glues that make them very, very sticky. So a compost tea isn't something we want to use on the soil. An extract is what we want to use on the soil. That's the difference between an extract and a tea. The tea is going to be filling in all of those sites on there. So guess what? The bad guys, if your soil isn't up to snuff, that's one cool way of keeping the bad guys at bay. And I'm more of a bigger fan of doing the extract, because that way, if the soil is good, this is going back to Fukuoka 101, one straw revolution. If the soil's good, 9 times out of 10, that plant's going to be good. So if you start there, everything kind of falls in line. So I've been doing a lot of that as of late. But like William said, if you have a little bit of, well, William, why don't you explain what's the benefit of having, let's say you only have 1 cubic yard of really, really awesome compost that you made at the house. And what's the benefit, instead of just taking that compost and spreading it out in your garden, what's the benefit of using an extract?
Well, it goes a lot further in the form of an extract, because it only takes like a couple of handfuls of like compost in order to inoculate a bucket, which can be diluted quite a few times. And that goes quite a ways. And then those handfuls that you use to inoculate that bucket can go right back into your compost and then get re-inoculated with the rest of the compost. So it goes a lot further. Like, using it as a planting medium is the least efficient way of using your compost. It's the most efficient way is using it as an extract or compost tea, using the organism.
There are times though when it's kind of beneficial to use it as a planting if you're going to start seeds or something, because it doesn't require really that much. So in that case, in fact, I got an experiment going on where I'm using deuterium depleted water, 10 parts per million. Let's see. And then I'm just, how do I explain this? I'm not really ready to explain it yet, but I just kind of spoke before I should have. But anyway, I'm using this deuterium depleted water. And if you're able to use that, supposedly you can get a 40% greater yield out of something. That's not really the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing with different variations of this deuterium depleted water, which is basically the kind of water, it's like the good Lord knew what he was doing. Okay. I'll put it this way. When you're near the equator, you have lots of ample sunlight, and that sunlight is going to benefit you and your plants in a massive way. But the further you get away from the equator, you have this phenomenon, especially in a lot of the Norwegian countries, in fact, all of them that are high latitude. Well, the sun isn't great there, but guess what is? The water is fabulous. That's why that Icelandic water, if you're going to buy bottled water, man, that's the best stuff you can buy, at least off the shelf out there, unless you're getting deuterium depleted water. But anyway, the deuterium is higher the closer you get to the poles, and it's lower the further north you go. So and this is where I refuse to believe, I mean, nobody's ever going to convince me that this is all one giant accident. How is it all of this unbelievable, fantastic water, it makes up for you not having the adequate sun. So in essence, what I'm doing is taking this low deuterium water that you would get in places that ordinarily wouldn't be here to do an experiment to just see how it would go when I'm at a higher latitude, which, at 3,000 feet, I'm higher. I'm at a higher latitude, plus I have great sun. I just want to see what's going to happen if I can combine the two. So I'm anxious to see exactly how that unfolds. So, Mountain Readiness in the house. Y'all keep an eye out for them. They're going to be doing some really, really awesome stuff, some big announcements coming up in the future. So we'll have to have T back on the show and talk about it. And like I said, y'all check out Mountain Readiness. It's the best festival I guarantee you don't know about. So that's the one you're always going to catch me at. So no doubt about that. So Thursday coming up this week. Let's see here. I think I'm supposed to have Jack Spirko on, but also at the same time in Asheville. I may have to see if I can push this show one way or the other, because they're going to be having a rally like they're doing out in California here in Asheville. I wouldn't mind going there and recording some of this and just seeing exactly how this goes down and seeing if the police are going to acquiesce like they did back when the Black Lives Matter stuff was going on. Back where, William, you were there, witnessed, literally seen these lunatics pushing around senior citizens, and then we got involved. Yeah. And one of my biggest regrets is there was a guy really, I should have caved his face in. I should have.
No, Dad, it was good you didn't. It was good you didn't, because it would it have been the right thing? Would you have been justified in doing it? Yes. But would it have served a good purpose? No. Because then all you would have done was just like fired up every veteran that was over there protesting, like, yeah, this is an option. He reminded me.
No, I mean, I live by the non-aggression principle, but this guy he was past. Look, non-aggression principle doesn't mean non-violent, okay? So when a person is threatening you, they've already crossed the line. And this clown got right up in my face where I could smell every nasty bacteria that was floating around in his nasty cranium. And then, of course, there were witches bouncing around there, putting hexes on a brother, the whole 9 yards, man. It was crazy, but I'm just kind of bouncing around whether or not I should even try to go to this thing. But anyway, folks, I think we're going to have a bomb show for you tonight, because I'm going to bring up some stuff that maybe you didn't think about as far as what's going on right now. Son, what's going on in your world?
Well, the good thing about going to protests and riots in Asheville is that Mom can beat up all the guys, so you're relatively safe out there.
Yeah, William made this joke a while back. He says, Mom, I think you can beat up about 90% of the women and about 95% of the men in Asheville.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah. Today I spent basically all day just cleaning out the garden. But this past weekend, I made a complete just dumb mistake. I was on the phone, I wasn't paying attention, and I was getting gas for the truck at the same time. Now, the truck is a diesel, but I put about 20 gallons of gas in it on accident. And then it's just right down the road, so I didn't get very far, and I still had diesel in the lines whenever I started driving. But I realized it like as soon as I got off the phone, and like as soon as I got to the house, it started acting a little funny, and I was like, oh crap. So I spent all weekend basically siphoning gas out of the diesel truck into 5-gallon buckets into like gas cans once I was able to go and get some gas cans. Yeah. So y'all don't make that mistake, but the truck's running fine. I just filled it up with diesel and then put a bunch of sea foam in there. The truck's running fine for right now. But yeah, I was worried for a second. That's the first time I've ever done that, was put gas in the diesel truck. And the whole time I was doing it, I was like, something just doesn't feel right. You know, that feeling you get when you're like, I'm screwing up. I just don't know how I'm screwing up.
Yep.
That's what was going on. But yeah, it's running just fine. Put a bunch of seafoam in it, put a bunch of diesel in it, and it's running fine now. But yeah, other than that, I'm pretty soon gonna do, I think either after this podcast or in the morning, I'm gonna do a video on how to compost animal bedding. And I'm gonna use part of your 30 bucket method to kind of trying to make it as simple as possible for people. Like, I'm trying to simplify, like some of the methods I've shown on YouTube won't make you the best absolute compost, but it'll give you way better compost than anything you can buy at the store. And it's super simple. So hopefully you're going to show these people as simple as possible, like procedures to follow when it comes to making compost. And hopefully we can get way more people making compost.
Yeah, you know, speaking of compost, folks, I'm going to give away another one of my trade secrets in making compost. And I'm telling you, it is Alan Booker was here. You know, he came out to look and see how we're doing things here. And folks, I'm going to give you one of the secrets that I handed over to him. And I'm absolutely convinced, even Dr. Will thinks that it's even biblical to a certain extent. I am absolutely convinced that the best compost I make always has a fair amount, as far as on the nitrogen side of things, always has a fair amount of critters that were once alive. Okay. Whether you process them, whether it's the guts, whether it's the feathers, the fins, the scales, whatever you happen to be using out there, folks, I really believe the best compost, and maybe William might say it differently. I didn't talk to him about this, but I really believe some of the best compost you're ever going to make always has something that once lived in it. And he thought that, you know, it was even biblical in terms of, you know, there's life in the blood. And to a certain extent, you know, I didn't think of that until he pointed it out to me, but I was telling him about it. And I'm like, man, I'm telling you, the best compost I ever make every single time has something that has given its life for the cause. What do you think?
Yeah. It's also another part that's biblical is like you're supposed to cover spilled blood with the dust of the earth or something like that. And that's what you're doing with compost. You're turning it into basically the dust of the earth or the soil and stuff like that. And it's going back to, you know, fertilizing your plants. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
I think so.
Folks, we're spending so much time talking about things like compost because I honestly wonder if we're not on the verge of I'm not gonna get hyperbolic here, but I'm gonna tell you honestly what I think. If you go back and listen to the episode, and I'll cover this more here in a minute, but if you go back and listen to the episode we did about predictions in 2025, I stand behind everything I said. I think that was the most important program we've done to date. And today might rival it. I don't know. But the reason I want to spend so much time and the reason why I think William and I have been spending so much time talking about compost, number one, we're both really good at it. Number two, I don't know how many Bitcoiners I know and they have no food storage. I don't know how many people that are in the gold and silver and they have no food storage and have no idea how to get it. If you have compost, everything else can fall into place. Your garden falls into place, your orchards, your food forest, all of it falls into place. If you're doing, and I'm oversimplifying it, but this is a form of wealth that nobody's talking about. We're talking fertility. You know, when the Haber-Bosch process, you know, where they get all the nitrogen-based fertilizers, when that was interrupted during the beginning of the whole Ukraine thing, we get most of our nitrogen-based fertilizers from Canada. Number two was Ukraine. And you should have seen mild-mannered farmers losing their ever-loving minds going in there, could not buy at the local farm store, could not buy the fertilizer they needed. Well, if they knew how to compost, maybe they wouldn't need that. If they knew some other, I mean, I'm not going to dog these guys. I'm just saying they know what they know. But most of us out here, and those of you listening right now, are not working on that kind of acreage. But you can make all the difference in the world. That's why I'm doing experiments with deuterium depleted water. That's why I'm doing some of these other experiments. I'm even linking up with some folks to learn more as it pertains to some of these Vogel crystals and how we can amplify our growing mediums. That's why I'm spending so much time on this. And frankly, it's not the full reason, but why I haven't spent a lot of time making videos. Number one, we've been spending so much time helping everybody else out. I haven't told everybody about the things we do because, well, we're not supposed to. And as far as helping other folks. But now it's gotten to the point where I've kind of shut the doors a little bit and I'm like, okay, we have really got to put foot to butt on our own place because things are getting away from us. And it's also a testament to how resilient these systems can be, even when you leave them fallow to a certain extent. Now, we've not fallen back at all when it comes to one thing that will get done no matter what. The animals move every single day. That is non-negotiable. And then the other things around it, well, we'll work those in, but that has to happen every single day. I'm not spending all this time to get these pastures squared away to where I can't even keep enough animals here to graze it all just to have it go backwards. So the soil's got to be number one on the list. And now that we're getting a little bit of headway here, I'm hoping to do more videos and we're going to talk about some of what we got going on, but spending more and more and more time talking about compost. Don't worry, it'll unfold here in a minute. All right, y'all, Redemption Shield, 10% off with promo code PERMA. Got my dogs on them right now. So I'm always G'd up from the feet up every single time I do a podcast. 10% off with promo code PERMA. Wave Watch. Anytime, if you ever see me out and about, like somebody stopped me at the grocery store the other day, guy that was giving me a compliment about the podcast and stuff like that. It was pretty awesome. Every single time people are asking, man, what is that on your wrist? And yeah, it's a Wave Watch. I honestly wear this thing every single time I leave the house. You never know what kind of freakazoids you're going to come across, and I might need, I might need that extra oomph to keep from strangling somebody. All right, KSL, Kentucky Sustainable Living, coming up July 18th through the 20th. Be there or be square. I got a promotion for them, but man, I forgot to bring it up right now, so I'm so sorry about that. So we'll go into the good news right off because I want to make sure we cover a lot of what we're about to cover today. All right, first good news. Junk science foodstuff in Texas now carry warning labels not recommended for human consumption, according to Senate Bill 25. Well, you know what? I'm not for government making any kind of mandates. I'm not for them banning anything for the most part. I'm really not. I think, as a free thinking, alive human being, you should be able to get the right information. And obviously you wouldn't want to put strychnine on the shelf and sell it as Coca-Cola, which, maybe there isn't a whole lot of difference there. But anyway, this is a move forward because Texas is in pretty bad shape in terms of the people there and in terms of their health.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, son, am I wrong?
No, I've made the comment multiple times around here. I can throw a quarter and it'll bounce its way to the other in a Walmart, and it'll bounce its way to the other side of the Walmart. There's no shortage of like very unhealthy, very, very unhealthy people here. Like it's almost like a cultural thing. It's weird. It reminds me of like, ancient China, like where it was viewed as like being wealthy if you were overweight and stuff, like you were well off and all that. It almost is like that around here. Like if you are in shape or if you're in any kind of like athletic condition, then you're like a try-hard or something. Does that make sense? Am I coming across right? Yeah.
No, you are, but it's going to be difficult to convey to a lot of folks out there. But yeah, I mean, you know what? You can be husky and stuff like that and still be in great shape. I mean, I've known many people like that. I'm just saying, in places like Texas, Oklahoma, a lot of those places there, you know what? I don't know what good the warning is going to do. At the end of the day, I mean, even around here, just go to the grocery store. And as I go through there, I'm kind of glancing at other people's carts as I pass by and just look what people are shopping for. I mean, if I'm in there, I am quite literally, unless I'm buying hot sauce, I guarantee I'm on the outside of the aisles. I'm getting things like, heavy cream or whatever, if they got it, the organic stuff that your mom likes. Or, she likes cottage cheese. Yeah, your mom eats like a pregnant woman. Sauerkraut or something that, she ran out of her own sauerkraut or pickles or whatever, and I got to pick up something there. Not on my high horse, I'm just saying. It's nice to see that they're trying to make a foot forward, but I'm not sure it's going to do any good in a lot of places. If you don't already know you shouldn't be drinking a gallon of Coke every day, I don't know what's going to help you. All right.
The warning, Dad, they ain't changing nothing. You ain't acting like a bag of Takis, a full sitting of Takis all at once ain't healthy. You had to know that before they put the warning on there. Like, oh, had I known that Oreos and Takis and Bluebell and all this wasn't healthy for me, I wouldn't have put on all this weight.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm trying to keep on a little bit more weight. Ordinarily, I'd be knocking off a lot of it right now, but I'm actually trying to keep on a little bit more. It's another little experiment I got in the wheelhouse right now. Ordinarily, I'd be pretty lean at this point, but I'm trying something. Bunch of little experiments going on, but I'm not going to get out in front of my skis on this one. I'll let you know how it unfolds. So the next one here, global greening surges 38%, but media silence reinforces climate crisis narrative. Yeah, so when you get into this article a little bit, you come to find out that areas, I'm not sure how much I can even believe this article, but it's coming from, it's coming from Mike Adams over here. I'm guessing they're saying, not that I'm trusting NASA, which stands for never a straight answer, but basically their confirmation is saying, the Earth since 2020 has greened up quite a bit. I'm not sure I'm buying that. What are your thoughts on that, son?
I would say no, if nothing else. Like, I don't know how they're, first of all, satellite images, that's a whole thing we can talk about, but how are they determining that it's greened up since 2020?
Yeah, I don't know if anything.
Especially when you look at how many thousands of acres of Amazon's being burned every day.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
hard to offset.
Yeah, and then you got the I can never say that word, desertification of I don't know how many different places throughout the planet. But I read that article because it was tough to find good news on a day like today. So if that is true, I'm hoping it's good. Now, here's another one. It's I'm going back to my old way. Eric's probably going to get with me and say, dude, talk about good news. But check this one out. Canned beef stew recalled nationwide over wood fragments. Okay, we'll spend just a little bit of time on this one. So why am I saying that's good news? Well, if it is true, well, it's good they got it off the shelf. Folks, as a industrial electrician, I spent most of my career working in manufacturing plants, okay? Most of my career. The quality control would blow your mind in a lot of these places. The extent, like, for example, I remember working at Rainbow Bread Company, and they had these you couldn't even go near the bread as it exited the little chute there because they had these giant magnets that would pull out any metal flakes, anything even close. It would yank it right out of the doggone bread and then kick the bread off to the side. I've worked in dog food plants. And folks, I'm here to tell you, Purina had cleaner standards than a lot of the food places I've worked at. I mean, I've worked at places where you do McDonald's hamburgers. I mean, that's just the nature of the work I did as an industrial electrician. So when they say canned beef stew recalled nationwide over wood fragments, folks, I'm calling BS on that because I know I've been in too many of these places. And supposedly it was 256,000 pounds of Dinty Moore canned beef stew. Ain't buying it, ain't believing it. And let me tell you what I think is really going on. And I got to give a hat tip to Steve Quayle because he's been one of the biggest ones breaking the news on stories like this. So you have what's called DUMBs, and it's an acronym, stands for Deep Underground Military Bases. And for the longest time, Steve Quayle was the first one, to my knowledge, that had made the connection. And then Mike Adams was talking about it, how he knew people that were also being tagged for this. So what they'll do is under national security, whatever they're short of in these deep underground military bases, they'll take it off the shelf, claim that it's some sort of whatever. They'll put the manufacturer under a gag order under national security, go figure. And they're filling up these DUMBs. Check this out. Steve Quayle talked about the last recall was a bunch of hot dogs. Hot dogs. I mean, do you have any idea how processed a freaking hot dog is? And I mean, it's surprised there's any bacteria in it at all. And they even radiate this stuff on the way out. They pulled in so many doggone hot dogs, it would blow your mind. And then here's how you knew a rat was out there. Here's how you knew you could smell a rat. Because it wasn't a day or two later that all of a sudden, whoever made the hot dog recall realized they didn't have buns. I'm dead serious. So then he did a recall on buns. Like I said, I've worked in bread factories, folks. Rainbow Bread Company. That was one of the accounts when I was an apprentice early on in my career. That was one of the places, and it blew my mind the extent to which these manufacturing plants, and we're talking 30 years ago, folks, the extent to which they would go to make sure the quality is over the top. So when you see these recalls, the frozen pizzas, the this, the that, especially things that you know are highly processed, they are putting them away for storage in a lot of these places. So now you got to start asking because there's recalls after recall after recall. If you're not looking for them, you're probably not paying attention, but after today you will be. So every time you see a recall, I guarantee it 9 times out of 10, unless it's a salad recall, which those are usually legit. And guess what? They're not coming from mom and pops. They're coming from these big conglomerates. But 9 times out of 10, that's exactly where it's coming from. And that's exactly where they're going, into these deep underground military bases. Yeah, I know that might seem a little conspiratorial, but folks, I'm far beyond caring whether somebody wants to call me a doggone conspiracy theorist. So somebody says next recalls mustard, and then somebody says in ketchup. Yeah. How do you recall buns? Exactly. That's what Steve Quayle was pointing out. So, folks, just keep in mind when you see these recalls like this, they're filling up all the stores underground because there may be something unfolding. Like I said, go back to that 2025 episode that I did. I made some pretty stunning predictions in there, and I think we're starting to see it kick off a little bit. All right, y'all. With that said, we're going to go straight over to my man, Eric Sider.
Hey, Eric Sider here with your Pimpcast tip of the day. Today's tip, live like you're off-grid. My first time living on Jeff Lawton's farm, they had a solar system in need of new batteries. At the time, it was extremely frustrating, running around at night, turning things off just so the lights would stay on. But it gave me a great appreciation for energy use. Yes, you can overstock your storage systems, but Bill Mollison always said, figure out how little you need, then design a system to provide that. We are extremely wasteful in America, but the systems are all seemingly designed to waste as much energy as possible. So instead of trying to change people's behavior, we should design systems to put it to positive use. The problem is the solution. The more difficult the problem, the better the design. You don't need to worry about your water use if the gray water is going to your garden. In a power outage, you only really need a few small systems, but if the water is shut off, you're in a different scenario. The average American uses over 100 gallons a day just in the house. That's 700 gallons a week. Those silly, overpriced rain barrels aren't going to last you a day. This is especially critical in climates with extended periods without rain. It's also why soil and mulch is so important to reduce the need to water. Good soil retains more moisture and thick mulch protects it from evaporating. It's also why we always say start small and expand outward. If you plant a 1/4-acre food forest in spring in California and your water turns off in the middle of summer, you're going to lose the whole lot. So designing your system as if you're off-grid creates inbuilt resiliency. You can find me on YouTube and Instagram at Eric Sider. If you're in need of permaculture t-shirts or remote permaculture consultation and design, head over to ericsider.com. And for those in the Sacramento area, check out my permaculture community group, permaculturefairoaks.org.
That's my dog right there. Folks, once again, hitting it right out of the park. Good night.
Yeah, Dad. His Jeff Lawton solar system still needs new batteries. I remember when I was there. Yeah, they never got replaced. But when I was there, I was in charge of large animal systems. And there was one week where we had straight up overcast. And the batteries were so bad. Like if the sun wasn't out that day, you probably didn't have electricity. And priority went to the electric fence for the animals, the chickens and the cows and stuff. And there was one week where we went with like very little sunlight. We had very little electricity. And we got to a point where we didn't even have enough to keep the electric fence going. And I just moved the cows and I put 3 strands up for the cows. And then later on that day, the day passes. And then Jeff comes up to me. He's like, hey, the cows are gone. And I'm like, oh, crap. Well, like, let me go find him. Jeff just disappears. Jeff was the definition of unbothered. Like, he just like, hey, the cows are out. Go find them. And then he just disappeared doing his own thing. So I'm going to look for the cows. I finally get them all wrangled up. And then he appears again after I get them all wrangled up. And he's like, yeah, you have to use more than 3 strands with these cows or else they'll just like get their heads in or underneath or whatever. And I'm like, Jeff, the power was out. the cows have just respected 3 strands this whole time. He just wasn't even hearing it. He wasn't hearing anything. All he knew is that you had to use more than 3 strands. It had nothing to do with the power being off. Nothing like that.
What kind of spoiled cows does he have, man? We can keep him in with 1.
They just were kind of rambunctious. Like if they could get their head over or under that wire, then they were going through.
They weren't getting hit hard enough then. Good night. I mean, it only takes 3,000 volts to put a cow back on his feet. Good night. Yeah. Well, he had a spoiled set of cows there, but yeah. All right, y'all. EMP Shield, $50 off with promo code PERMA. Look, world is a crazy place. In fact, the world wouldn't be in such a snarl if Marx had been Groucho instead of Carl. So we got a lot of weirdos and commies on the loose right now. But anyway, EMP Shield, $50 off with promo code PERMA. If we, okay, I was going to say something I'm probably going to regret, so I won't say it. So I'll say this. you want to be squared away for anything that's about to happen. And whether it's, maybe we're embroiled in the Civil War over here before too long. I hope not, but I think I'm going to make a pretty strong case that it might happen. Whatever goes down, EMP Shield's got you squared away. So $50 off with promo code PERMA. All right. So I titled this one, what does LA teach us about zoning out of Babylon? And I think that's kind of apropos when you stop to consider it. Let me back up to that 2025 show that I talked about. Okay. I made the case. If you read the book, it is called, doggone it, The Fourth Turning. Okay. If you get into the book, The Fourth Turning, every 80 years, you have what they call a saculum. And within that 80 years, you would have had 4 turnings. So roughly 80 years in this book, they describe and they go over like the last 500 years and how you can prove that every single around 80 years, something's going to jump off. Okay. I'll just give you some of the cliff notes. Just, you'll understand as an American. Okay. Revolutionary War around, 1776. Let's just use that as your marker. What happened 80 years later, roughly? Civil War. More people died in the Civil War than all other wars combined. Well, until we get into the modern age, unless you want to talk about what everybody put in their arms. And of course, a lot more people died over that. But anyway, 80 years later, what do you have? World War II. 80 years later, where does that bring you? 2025. Now, 2025 to 2027, folks, I wasn't just pulling this out of nowhere, okay? I'm telling you what I see happening and what I see unfolding, and I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to prepare you. With what you see unfolding right now, I am not for a moment believing that it is not contrived and not controlled. I'll give you a prime example. If you go to my X account at Permapastures Farm, you'll find out what I put out earlier today. And I think it's resonating. Okay, let's just consider for a moment. I'm your humble farmer here in the wilds of North Carolina. And if I wanted to get all the illegals, I asked myself a while back, if I wanted to get all of the people that are here illegally out of this country, what would be the best way of going about it? I know what I'd do. I'd enact some legislation that charged every employer of anyone here illegally, if they knowingly have an illegal person working for them, they get $10,000 fines for every single day. They would self-deport overnight because there is not a business owner on this planet that would ever risk it. And then overnight, they would self-deport. And then what are you left with? All the thugs and criminals and everybody else who didn't have regular jobs. Well, you could pick them up with a butterfly net. Pretty easy to do it at that point. But you could put the onus on the business owners because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are hiring all of these folks. Like I said, $10,000 a day. See, you can't do it like you do with OSHA, where at these refineries and stuff like that, they don't upgrade the refineries because, as I was once told, remember, I've worked in all these manufacturing and industrial plants. I remember being in Wynnewood, Oklahoma, and being told during the safety brief that it was to be especially cautious around that refinery because it was cheaper for them to pay our death benefit. It was cheaper for them to pay the fines than it was for them to pay our death benefits. They honestly told us that when going to work there. And as you can imagine, I wasn't there long. So, of course, I got on the first thing smoking the first chance I could. So they told you that. So the fines are so low that they have no impetus at all to fix these places up. Well, that's why I'm saying $10,000 a day for every employer knowingly hiring anybody that's here illegal, they'd be on the first thing smoking. And then you do it right. Okay, you want to come in here? Because check it out. If you sneak into Mexico, yeah, look at their laws and find out what happens to you if you are an illegal immigrant into Mexico. You want to talk about draconian. So, yeah, they're going to go absolutely medieval. Imagine being some gringo in a Mexican prison. Ain't going to be a good day for you, okay? So Here we are, fast forward to the modern time. And I'm thinking, okay, if I can come up with a sensible plan that makes absolute sense, I'm not believing that the powers that shouldn't be couldn't come up with this, because like I said, they would self-deport overnight. And then the ones that are left, all the thugs, the criminals, the blatant criminals, obviously you're here illegally, you're a criminal to a certain extent. Anyway, the first thing that's going to happen, processing houses, all these others, they're going to go belly up at first. Okay. And don't give me this garbage that Americans won't do these jobs. Well, what do you think I did all through high school? I roofed houses, drywall. Don't tell me Americans won't do these jobs, because I used to do them. But then I wouldn't do them for slave wages, which is what they're paying these people. So they're not even getting a livable wage, most of them doing these jobs, all these jobs that supposedly Americans don't want to do. They will do these jobs. So, especially if they, obviously if things get tight enough, people will find out. I don't know how kids are doing it right now, because a lot of folks just simply don't want to work. When I was a kid, and anybody in the chat out there, if I'm wrong, correct me. Now, I grew up in the 80s, and I know a lot of you out there listening right now did as well. Does anybody else remember the time that if you wanted, hey, thanks for the dough, Tim, fines just mean, what's he saying here?
Fines just mean it's legal for a fee.
There you go. There you go. Anybody remember back in the 80s? I remember trying to get a job, and you had to compete with other people just to try to get a job at a Burger King. And back then, minimum wage was $3.15 an hour. Now, I thought I hit the jackpot when all of a sudden I can go out here and do what I thought was a real man's job, roofing houses, planting grass on a farm. Man, I was making $6 an hour, man, and I was crapping in tall cotton. At least I thought I was. Of course, blew every single bit of it on pizza and Coke. I mean, that's what I did as a kid, Anyway, blew it on pizza and Coke. That's what we did. But I was out there working, and I learned a trade, and I know how to do that. And then there were other things that I did. But I remember competing, people having to compete. You dress up to go in for an application at a Burger King. Now, what's happened? I don't know. I don't want to go too far afield, because honestly, I could do an entire show talking about, work ethic and all these other things. But anyway, that's what I did. So I roofed houses. When I got out of the Army, I was in the electrical apprenticeship. And at the same time, me and my best friend were running an insulation business that we started. So I was doing that work too. And then what happened? Overnight, Burns Insulation came into town, and we were doing cellulose insulation. Bought a machine, bootstrapped it the whole way, operating, doing everything in every way that we could. We're out there doing good. And then all of a sudden, Burns Insulation came into town. They rolled in with a bunch of illegals. We couldn't even bid the job for what these guys were doing it for. Why? Because they were hiring illegal labor. Okay, you could set all that straight overnight. You put a $10,000 per employee per day and see how quickly these guys self-deport. Because ain't no employer going to put up with that, or not with those kinds of fines. Then you do it the right way. You come back in. And then look, if there's going to be a lull, hey, this is what happens when you let things get out of whack. So let's talk about, I at least wanted to cover that. Folks, is anybody else out there starting to think we're at a Fort Sumter moment? Right? If you believe the official story of the Civil War, which I don't. Supposedly the South attacked Fort Sumter. Bam, we're in Civil War, just like that. Yeah, and of course, Lincoln thought he was just going to steamroll right through the South. Got his butt handed to him at the Battle of Bull Run, at least the first one. And, had us, hightail back up north. Well, anyway, Civil War breaks out. 700,000+ Americans died in that war. I can't help but wonder, like I said, we're at the end of that fourth turning. Folks, and what you see unfolding right now is what a fourth turning looks like. This, if you're a student of history, this is what a fourth turning looks like. And it ain't pretty. And it ain't wonderful. And it's going to get worse. I will bet any amount of money. I just hope and pray that all the predictions I made are wrong. And I made them on the basis of knowing, just like King Solomon said, all these things happen cyclically. We are aware of this pattern. It's called a saculum. It's Latin for basically 80 years, okay? And you see it unfolding right now. You're seeing the first salvos, I think, in what's unfolding right now. And the powers that shouldn't be, whether on the left and the right, I think they're all fomenting it. Because if I can come up with a sensible solution on how to get the people that ain't supposed to be here out, am I missing something?
And we have a podcast called the Pimp Cast. Like we ain't exactly qualified.
I mean,
but that solution seems to make sense.
nobody's ever going to think for a moment that I'd be an ambassador to the court of St. James. Nobody's ever going to say that. So if a farmer in Western North Carolina can come up with a peaceful solution, just like, for example, on the Cuban Missile Crisis, you got lunatics like Curtis LeMay and all the other people that were in the Joint Chiefs at the time literally wanted to go to World War III right there with Russia, saying, oh, Curtis LeMay was making these statements like, oh, we'll only lose about 40 million, but we'll wipe out all of Russia. What kind of freaking lunatic? John F. Kennedy was like, I can't even believe these basket cases are working for me. Okay? These are the kind of lunatics, and that's why everybody, when you see somebody in a uniform, they automatically genuflect and think, oh, this is a great person. Folks, just on my experience alone, I can tell you there's a whole lot of basket cases wearing that uniform, and some of the worst are generals. I could tell you some stories. I'm dead serious, but that's another program. But I'm not gonna belabor this any longer than I could, folks. From a historical standpoint, I can provide an impressive list from the top of my head of all the reasons why you not be afraid, but to be vigilant. But while Babylon is burning, folks, and I'm calling that obviously that part of California right now, you don't have to be a part of it. So, you know, the point I'm trying to get to is what lessons can we take away from this? So I got them written down here. So Babylon burns while the remnant builds. That's exactly what we ought to be doing. So, you know, LA is living in a parable if you stop to think about it. I mean, they worship wealth, fame, fortune, pedophiles, government even, and they're reaping the whirlwind right now. Well, you can't reform Babylon, but you can exit it. And a lot of you folks are living in an equivalent to, okay, Asheville, North Carolina. That's my Babylon that's close to me. Some of you may live near, I don't know, pick your city du jour. Son, you're not far from Dallas.
Yeah.
You're far enough.
Yeah, definitely far enough. I'm not touching Dallas, but it's not far enough away, I should say.
Well,
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Ahead.
I was going to make a point about fourth turnings and the saculums and stuff like that. Like on the bright side, this is when the most like millionaires and billionaires are created. So you can use this chaos as an opportunity to, like, half the battle is knowing that it's about to happen. Half the battle is just knowing and being prepared for it and being ready for the opportunity once it presents itself. But yeah, keep in mind, this is when the most like new generational wealth is created is during saculums and everything. So you can use this as an opportunity, fill in the gap somewhere, and set up potentially your generations.
Well, I couldn't agree more. There's so many different ways you can go about it. And for a number of people, it's going to mean, okay, I invest more in Bitcoin, because as things go a little more haywire, and you can see it already, folks, they already have rally after rally after rally planned all over this country, centered around cities, of course. So if you're there, like I said, you can't reform it, but you can exit it. So if you have to be there, take all the mitigation strategies we've talked about in previous podcasts and put them to work. You know, zoning out Babylon starts with zoning out your life. You know, permaculture zones aren't just for design. You know, they're spiritual and social filters to a certain extent. There are certain things in Asheville that I like, and it's usually food centered, but people centered, not so much. Now, there are some good folks, and I met a whole gang of them yesterday when I was hanging out. But they're few and far between in any of the places I go. So unless I can go to meetings or rallies where there are like-minded people like that, generally the person on the street that I run into 9 times out of 10 is a basket case. And I'm not exaggerating. They are. I think this jab has created more problems than anybody's willing to talk about. But some of these people really do not even understand what planet they're on. So you got to ask, who do you let in your zone 1 in terms of, your mind? When I say zone 1, I'm talking with your mind, your family, your homestead, your friends. Who do you let within that zone 1? Okay. Think about those things. So I am really, really cautious about, folks. When I say cautious, to the point where I'm an absolute Nazi when it comes to who I let within certain zones around my mind, my family. I've always been that way about my family. William would tell you when he was growing up, I was very, very cautious who I brought and let my family ever meet. I was very cautious about it. And if they were a dummy, a basket case, whatever the case may be, no, you're just not getting within my zone 1. So be really cautious about that. Anything to add?
No, and well, the thing that sticks out there is playing that without rule of law game. If you're trying to build like a mutual assistance group and you're trying to invest in people, turn it into like a game night and play without rule of law. Yeah, I think you might be surprised by some of the answers that some of these people give. I know it was kind of surprising for some of the answers at Midwest Preparedness Conference, especially once, and this might be a handy tactic you can use, but once people start getting topped off, then they start thinking, they start spilling the beans on what they would actually do. And then you can, make the judgment based off that. But yeah, without rule of law, I think if you just do like a search engine search for it, it should pop up. It's a card game similar to like Apples and Apples, something like that.
Babylon sells dependency. Permaculture sows sovereignty. You dig? Think about cities. Okay, they teach you to outsource everything. Eric hits on it quite a bit. Permaculture teaches you, remember that prime directive we've talked about before? What is it? And that's the part most of the purple breathing permaculture people never talk about. That prime directive, and I'm going to paraphrase it, it's on a shirt, is right now, today, take immediate ownership and responsibility for everything your family does and fails to do. See, we tend to forget that other part. Once you take full responsibility for that, then everything falls back on your shoulders. So it teaches you to take responsible for what feeds, heals, and empowers you and your family. And you demand the same out of them. That's exactly, why everything is unnatural. Son, remind me of that thing with Bill Mollison, what he says about cities as far as populations and when they start becoming unhealthy.
What was it? Like over 3 stories, mental health issues start developing at an increased rate. And as it populations over 30,000, people start committing crimes outside of necessity. So like outside of hunger or broke or whatever, that's like outside of necessity is when they start committing crimes, is over 30,000.
That's where we are right now. And these places are tinder boxes. So if you can get out, folks, do everything you can, because I got a feeling, look, I'm hoping this, what I suspect could very well be, I'm just hoping it doesn't develop into an Archduke Franz Ferdinand moment. Okay. And if you believe the official story of that, that's what kicked off World War I. I'm just hoping that's not going to be the case, and hopefully not a Pearl Harbor. But I'm expecting, if this thing escalates anymore, it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden there's a false flag on either side. Let's say the Marines show up. It wouldn't even shock me if one of these lunatics on the other side, or either side for that matter, shoots a tow missile or something into a crowd, and then all of a sudden you have a complete crackdown, and all these people saying, like Laura or Larry Loomer, whatever his name is, talking about, yeah, I'm all for using Palantir on these illegals. Do you not realize, like Eric texted me earlier today, do you not realize that this is going to be turned on you? So be careful what you wish for, folks. Look, I want to see an end to all this dumb stuff too, but there are sensible ways in which it can be done. And I'm always concerned when you're talking about taking military presence and putting them on the boots on the ground. A violation of posse comitatus, folks, that's a big deal. When you're starting to put military on the ground, these things escalate, and they escalate uncontrollably. to quote Michael Yon to be accurate. So anyway, the media is Babylon's mouthpiece. So everything you're getting from the prostitute media right now, you can believe is a manufactured lie. They want to sow division, fear, chaos, you name it. What they don't show is everyday people like you and I opting out and building parallel systems. They don't want you to see that. And folks, that's one of the biggest reasons why they try so hard, why they are suppressing me, whether it's in YouTube or whether it's on X, because I'm not left or right. I'm one of those ones saying, hey, let's not comply with either side. Let's be sovereign. Let's build our own little fiefdoms out here. And the worst part is, because I don't fall into their left or right paradigm, it only makes you dumb, in my view. I'm that much more dangerous, okay? Especially being a person that's brown. Well, as of late, I'm probably black because I spend so much time in the sun. But you get the point. They don't want somebody like me. They don't want my message getting out there saying, look, both sides are absolutely contrived and controlled. And if anybody says different, look, we can have that debate and you're probably going to be disappointed. But that's why they don't want this message getting out there. So here's another thing. Babylon, they hate the notion of you owning property or land. Think about the origins of this country, folks. I want you to really, really think about this. When America was founded, I almost get choked up when I stop to think about this. It was such a big deal that for the first time in the history of humanity, a person like you and me could own land and defend it with a firearm. Do you have any idea how revolutionary that was when it happened? And how revolutionary it is now? Chances are you don't. It's because, like it says in the preamble to the Constitution, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Well, the problem with the posterity is that we forget about what it took to secure those blessings of liberty. That's the problem. America truly was something special once upon a time. Yeah, we had flaws, we had problems, we had a lot of things that weren't necessary, that were warts, that were getting worked out. But the idea of what it was, the notion that a private person like you and I could own land and defend it with a firearm, was so far beyond. If you understand how the world worked from the beginning of when we can think, I mean, there had never been a society that ever would allow such things.
Well, still, even today, if you look at England, like when you hear people like there's a gardener in England that I watch every once in a while. And when he's talking about his garden, he refers to that piece of property as his allotment, like not his property, not his garden or anything like that. It's his allotment, what he's basically been allotted by the government to control for a little bit.
Yeah. And even he doesn't even really control it, because I listened to an interview in a podcast. I'm glad you brought that up, son, because I was listening to a podcast yesterday of an English guy being interviewed by another English guy, and they were talking about the farming and the nonsensical things that are going on there and how the private land ownership is going the other way. And they're being taxed out of their own properties, the whole 9 yards. But what we had going on here, folks, was undreamed of in the history of humanity. Nobody ever dreamed that this was even possible. But here it is. We've forgotten what it took and how big a flipping deal that was for a private person to own a firearm and defend their own land against the government. That was undreamed of. But like I said, that's why Babylon hates land. And having land to a certain extent sets you free. Even if there's a lot of people that write to me and say, man, I wish I had the land you have and blah, 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 blah. Well, folks, before I had land, I farmed on other people's land, okay? It's like Greg Judy always says, it isn't who owns the land, it's who controls that land. And you'd be shocked at how much land you can get when you're renting, and you can do a long-term 10-year lease, and you can grow more food than you ever dreamed of. So, or like Curtis Stone used to do, just use somebody else's, if you're in a urban environment, use somebody else's front yard, grow it there. You can do it. So zoning out sometimes means building in. Build your own systems of education. Team up with other folks. I mean, your systems of healing. How about the economy? You got Bitcoin out there, which I'm learning more and more about every day. yeah, I like Bitcoin's portability, but it does have flaws as I see it as well. But you can't expect Babylon to give you permission to be free. And like I've told you before on this podcast, folks, I don't obey unjust laws. I don't care what your rules are. If it's an unjust law or just plain stupid, I ain't playing along. You're telling me I can't. We can sit here, son. You explain this one to me, like Joel often says. Us and everybody in this podcast right now could go to a potluck. Everybody brings some food. We all sit down, we eat it. Huh. Perfectly legal. But the second any one of us went out there and decided to put a price tag on it, it just became illegal. Or I can go out there, hunt a deer, harvest that deer, break it down, and I can give away all that meat. But the second I try to sell it, it's illegal. Jimmy crack corn and I don't care. Jimmy could be smoking crack and I don't care. Because honestly, I don't care what your rules are. That is an unjust law. It is stupid and I'm not playing along. And folks, I'm encouraging, you do what you feel like you need to do, but I've drawn my line in the sand. I am a free man. A lot of you out there view yourself as a free woman, a free American. Call yourself whatever you want. Call yourself whatever you want. But at the end of the day, I don't obey unjust laws. Bottom line, you're telling me, in one of these cities, these big cities, it was illegal to feed homeless people. Well, I'm not playing along. You tell me it's illegal to do something idiotic, I'm not playing along. Martin Luther King, honestly, with the benefit of hindsight, I now realize why they didn't want a lot of black folks in restaurants back then, because they didn't tip. That was a joke. That was a joke, but not really. But no, there's some truth in that one. But no, the real truth of it is that they didn't obey unjust laws. You're going to have me sit in the back of the bus, or you're going to make me sit in the blacks only counter, or drink out of a black only water fountain, or go to a black only restroom or whatever. Okay. We didn't participate in that. So what makes you feel like you ought to participate in this nonsense? This is 10 times worse. And in fact, honestly, under segregation, there was a pretty good argument made by a number of contemporaries at the time that honestly, there was a certain degree of black folks that were wondering why other black folks wanted to go into white restaurants when the black restaurants had better food. So they were like, I don't understand this, dude. Why would you want to go over there and we got collard greens and fried chicken over here? I don't understand why you want to go over there and eat meatloaf. So, but it was honestly, this is some of the debate that was happening at that time. Now I'm making a joke out of it, but the bottom line is, if it's an unjust law, frankly, I'm not playing along. So Babylon programs, and this is a big one on me, especially being such a high devotee to people like John Taylor Gatto, but Babylon programs through schools, screens, and let's be honest, straight up syringes. You dig? That's how they program. LA's collapse. Can you even imagine? I forget what the numbers were. I wish I'd have brought those statistics in here of the number of kids that can't even read in many of these schools. There was a video that was on X. I showed it to my best friend because honestly, I was blown away by it. There were these two high school kids, and there was a dad. William, did I send this video to you?
I don't think so, no.
He asked them to spell two. You
didn't send that to me.
Okay.
How to remember that.
I'll give you all a brief synopsis of how it went down. He tells these two boys, one of them was his son, the other was his nephew. He says, and he has a chalkboard there. He says, spell two. And they're looking at each other. These kids, I'm telling you, judging by their age, they had to be in 9th or 10th grade. He says, spell two. There's 3 ways to spell it. Just pick one of them. So there's T-O, T-O-O, and T-W-O. His son gets up there after being admonished to a great, Dad, honestly, if it got this far away from your dad, you're at fault too. He gets up there, and I'm kid you not, he writes the number 2. And his dad loses his ever-loving mind. And he tells the other kid, all right, you better get this right. And then he gets over there, he says, 2. He said, yes, spell 2. And then the other kid puts a 2. So now it's 22. And he tells him, get the blank out of this house. Both of you, I don't know what you learned. Okay, if you got that far in school, I'm pretty sure, William, you were reading Lord of the Rings books when you were in junior high? I had you reading those books back then?
Something like that, yeah.
May not even have been
Yeah.
that old.
I remember during the summers, Dad had like a mandatory page limit that I had to read every day during the summers. So, which looking back was a good idea, but I was not a fan of them during the summers.
Well, with the benefit of hindsight, I would have chosen better ways to go about it. But that's, you're not given the download right off. So I made some tactical errors in how I did a lot of things. Honestly,
Well, I'm not blaming you. I was just saying that was one of the books. It was Lord of the Rings. It's not like I was reading manuals or something.
But if you
was Lord of the Rings.
If you couldn't read it in 9th grade, I think I would have failed as a parent to a great deal if I didn't know you couldn't read until you're in 9th or 10th grade. But anyway, that's a legit video out there. So, that's these teachers, a lot of them, there are some good ones out there. Probably not many, but there are some. But I'll tell you what, no matter all the teachers I had, except for a few in high school, were complete nincompoops. And that was made evident to me when Facebook came out, because I couldn't even believe I actually looked up to some of these teachers on there that couldn't even write complete sentences.
I remember when you first got a Facebook and you started finding people that you went to school with, and you just going on rants. Like,
I was like,
people are morons.
No, I was going on mostly about the teachers. These were teachers that I looked up to, and these were the biggest morons out there. But I'll tell you where I did get an education was around that dinner table. I'm the product of 2 convicted felons, but honestly, the things I needed to learn in life were done. Honestly, I learned from my older brothers and my parents. Now, granted, I mean, not the best parents in the world, but at least if nothing else, I learned what not to do. And I know a lot of people don't have that and don't necessarily have that time. But if you don't take that time to try to deprogram, if you're in a position where you have to send them off to schools, folks, you better do some serious detox when they get home. Tell me what you learned today. Oh, you learned that in history? Well, I was sitting here teaching William, okay, let's talk about how many people really died under Mao. Oh, you never learned about Mao in school. You know what? I didn't either. Let's figure out how many were killed. Didn't learn about Pol Pot. Didn't learn about how the United States basically made all that happen under idiots like Henry Kissinger. Oh, let's learn about that. Let's learn about how many people Stalin really killed. Strangely, there's no Holocaust museum for any of those folks, but I digress. Anyway, permaculture is about deprogramming really through observation, interaction with the nature around you, and let's be honest, critical thinking. I mean, it really is the polar opposite of what you're learning in these schools or what they're learning. So if you have to send them there, and folks, I mean, man, I sure hope you're doing everything you possibly can. Like I said, I know there are folks that don't necessarily you don't have a choice, or it's very difficult for you to do it. But be thinking about ways in which you can deprogram these kids, because honestly, the only worthwhile thing I'm going to leave behind on this planet is my posterity. So, and some trees maybe, but you out of the two, which is more important. To me, spiritual resilience is the real exit plan. I mean, I can prepare all day long, put in all the trees out there, put out all the food, do all this and that. And honestly, what is all of it if you gain this whole world and lose your soul? And Babylon ain't about none of that. Speaking of which, permaculture isn't just about soil, it's about your soul. I mean, when you really get down to brass tacks, at least the way I look at it, there's no written definition for what it should be, but that's exactly how I feel about it. I mean, I wake up every day and I love the work I do. Not everybody can say that. I know that. But you know what? I spent a lot of years doing work I didn't want to do so I could do the work I wanted to do. But folks, at the end of the day, don't fight Babylon necessarily. I mean, there may be a time you have to. But would you not be better served by outgrowing it? There was a guy with a whole lot of sense who once wrote, dying for what one believes is well and good for those so inclined. But what cause cannot be better served by living? I agree. So outgrow it. Reposition yourself if you can. The real victory when you get down to brass tacks isn't about signs or politics. It's about being a productive hand on your productive land and, building strong families and spiritually anchored in Christ is how I look at it. Now, did I always know this? No, but this is part of the growth I've had over the years. So while Babylon is really all around us, I mean, some could probably make the argument that this whole country is. And honestly, given enough time, I think I could probably make a pretty convincing argument that it probably is as well. At the end of the day, when Rome was sacked, there was still a remnant. Yeah, they were walking around probably 100 years later thinking aliens built all this stuff as they were walking through Rome. And by every indication and the way we're going, if we don't change tact, if we don't make a tact really soon, we're going to be doing it right here in the United States of amnesia.
Trying to remember how to paint.
Well, that's exactly what happened. I mean, that's what people tend to forget. We're doing in just over 250 years what it took the Romans 2 millennia to do, if you stop to think about it. And I'm talking all the way back from the Etruscans to the Roman kings to the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. Okay? It spans roughly, actually a little bit more than 2,000 years. But we're doing in under 200 and some years what it took them 2,000 years to do. And if you overlay all the things that brought them down and you overlay it with America, I keep saying Babylon because it seems to fit. There's everything that destroyed Rome is exactly what you see unfolding right now, but you don't have to be part of it. That's why I'm saying, y'all, consider your exit strategy. Because honestly and truly, if I'm going to be honest with you, I could sit here and give you some mealy mouth, oh, this might happen. No, I really believe that 2025 through 2027 is going to rock your world in a big way. And I think you're starting to see the opening salvos of it right now. And I think if this thing escalates one side or the other, or perhaps even both, we'll do a false flag. And I'm reluctant to even talk about the scenarios because I don't want to speak something like that into existence. But it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden the Marines hit the ground and then all of a sudden there's some patsy, Lee Harvey Oswald style, that supposedly mows down a bunch of, the scenarios are legion. And you could probably figure out as many as I could as well. But at the end of the day, folks, you just got to outgrow it. You got to leave it. You got to get away from it. You got to make your exit. And I know a lot of us out there are doing it right now. Son, what do you got to add?
I think you covered it all. Yeah, if you don't have an exit plan from the cities, just in case, I would start working on one. Yeah. And for those of you that are, going to be stuck in the cities, then figure out the best ways you can bug in, or the ways you can be protected and supplied for while you're, waiting the cities out and everything. But yeah, things are getting crazy.
If you're in one of these mega cities, folks, you better be working on that exit plan ASAP, because I think, as Shakespeare put it, now is the winter of our discontent. Now, we're not there yet, but all these things begin with a match, and it's going to be weird. So, hey, y'all, I want to thank everybody for coming in today. Look, I know this isn't one of those happy-go-lucky stories, but at the end of the day, if you're to take the moral to the story of this program, I guess it's exit Babylon as quickly as you can. So, look, I want to thank everybody in the chat. I want to thank everybody out there for tuning in. Till next time, stay alert.
Stay alive.
The knowledge ring with roots that run deep. Wisdom from soul, permaculture dreams. Let the ideas unfold. I'm grooving with the truth. Feeling nature's good. Who's got the answers? All we need to do. Listen to the earth, they got us through. Let's see the shame. Watch the world spin from the smoke. harmony begin in the cycle of life. For the magic's alive. Tune it to the beat till the fire and thrive. Go to the baby,